everyone, and welcome to another webcast in the Iconics Transform Your Business webcast series. Today's webcast is Digital Twins Drives Digital Transformation. Before I start today, just want to go over a few housekeeping rules. My name is Amanda Gordon. I'm the Senior Marketing Programs Manager here at Iconics, and right now you are in a listen-only mode. That means if you have any questions throughout the webcast, you'll want to type them into the questions section of your GoToWebinar panel, and we will answer those at the end of the webcast. You can also email us at webcast@iconics.com for any other further, more detailed questions that you'd like to ask. And with that, I'll introduce our presenters for today's webcast.
Hello, my name is Roberto Vercelli. I'm a senior software architect in Iconics, and with me there is Ziwi Lee, is the Director of Innovation Incubation Solution in Iconics.
Hello, everyone.
Today I'm going to talk about the digital transformation path, and I will explain what is the role of digital twins in the digital transformation path. Then I will talk about AssetWorks, which is the Iconics digital twin platform, how to configure it, how to generate graphics using AssetWorks, and then Z will go through the showcase and the examples for our digital twin solution. Before talking about that, I want to talk about a little bit about Iconics. Iconics is a company that was founded in 1986 in Foxborough, and after 30 years, now we have offices in more than 100 countries, and we have more than 400 partners. We have more than 365,000 installations worldwide, and we have a very close relationship with Microsoft. In fact, we won 6 times the Partner of the Year award from Microsoft. We are specialized in many areas, especially energy smart buildings, smart cities, manufacturing intelligence and industrial automation, water utilities, oil and gas, and public infrastructures. As I said, we are specialized in many areas. You can see some of them here, and we have very big successful projects. For example, for building automation, we have automated the building in London. It's called the Deloitte building. We are also managing the Microsoft campus in Seattle, and we are managing Scottish Water, or we have large projects for airports, for example, in LaGuardia Airport or the Heathrow Terminal 4. For all these projects, we went through the digital transformation path. And what is the role of the digital twins in the modern world? First of all, we need to explain what is the digital transformation path. It's augmenting and accelerating processes via digital solutions. What does it mean? First of all, the very first thing you need to do is to identify the processes in your business. These processes may be, for example, they can start from very small things like the heating system in a building, or they can be, for example, an entire wind farm or the pipes in a water system. But once you identify the processes, you want to identify the assets associated with these processes. The assets can be, for example, the VAC in a heating system or the temperature sensor. Once the assets are identified, you go and discover the asset telemetries. And Iconics allows to easily collect these telemetries from your system. So you collect the data from your telemetries, you create an history out of this data, and once you have all the data collected, you start creating KPIs. Once you have the KPIs, you can visualize this data and you can identify the improvements for the processes. You can identify problems. You can see what can be improved or what is not working correctly. Once these problems are identified, you can address them. You can go back. You can change how the system works, and then you start collecting the data again. The whole is the digital transformation path. Now, you may, obviously, the first 3 steps are probably the most difficult one because you need to collect all the data. But in the long run, where you are going to spend most of the time are the last 3 steps, because it's a process that is continuously happening and it never ends. And that's exactly where digital twins comes to help, and where you can use digital twins to fasten and make the things easier. How can this be done? First of all, we can take a look at a real-world example. In this example, we have an heating system. So we have physical equipment. As you can see, we have a fan, we have an HVAC. We need to create a digital twin out of this equipment, collecting the data sources. These data sources can be, for example, the temperature coming from the temperature sensor, the humidity, the pressure, and the speed. Once the telemetries are collected, we can start creating the KPIs. And these KPIs help us identify problem areas of improvements, all the good stuff. In this case, for example, we can have the rate of change for the temperature, or we can identify the threshold limits, we can create achieving targets, or we can have analyze historical patterns. So when you have, for example, the history stored, you can go back in the history and see if the problem was happening at a specific time, and if it was happening with some occurrence. Of course, your equipments are in spaces. So in a real world, for example, your HVAC or the fan are in a conference room or in a meeting room or in some office. And with the digital twins, you can associate and create relationships between the equipments and the space where the equipments are. And all of this is done very naturally in the same logical structure. So once the data is collected and we have the data in digital twins, the first thing that we can achieve is the continuous monitoring, because with the KPIs, you have all the values under control 24 hours a day, and then you can visualize continuously the data. Then we can create conditional alarming. So we can create alarms, or we can have faults that predict when an equipment is malfunctioning, and then you can take action. We can do historical analysis of the data that was collected and all the historical values. We can do comparison between the values that are coming from the system and take action. And then we can also have remote configuration, because our system allows to remotely configure the equipment. But what are the effects of these 5 steps? First of all, we can have a faster response, because with continuous monitoring, you can identify immediately a problem and respond immediately to these issues. With conditional alarming, we can reduce the downtime of an equipment, because if we can predict when the equipment is not working, we can go there and repair it before it's completely broken. With historical analysis, we can improve the performance. So we can go monitor the history and check what can be improved, or whether we can do better. With comparison, we can increase the efficiency of the equipment, and with remote configuration, we can lower the cost of ownership, because we don't physically need to go where the equipment is, but we can remotely adjust the settings. Now let's talk about AssetWorks, which is the Iconics digital twin solution. As we said, we have the physical equipment and we need to create a digital twin out of it. First of all, we had Iconics products can collect data from several data sources. Here there are a few examples. And from these data sources, we can obtain a hierarchical structure where we can see and manage all our assets, and where we can easily understand where are our equipments and how they are performing. AssetWorks also normalizes all the different ways the data sources are coming in a single view of the client. The client doesn't need to know, for example, that a temperature sensor or a temperature value is coming from BACnet or from Modbus. It just needs to know that the value is a temperature. Not only, but with AssetWorks, we can create this logical structure that can simplify and provide the same information in the same way to the final user. How can we configure AssetWorks? First of all, we need to create an equipment class with equipment properties in our configuration. Then we can create a spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet, where we can create different instances of this equipment class. The spreadsheet then is going through the bulk asset configurator, and it automatically generates the configuration, the AssetWorks configuration out of the spreadsheet. Why the spreadsheet is important? First of all, it's an Excel file, so everybody can use Excel. The format of the file is very simple, so you can take the file and provide the file to some operator that knows everything about your assets, and he doesn't need to know anything about SCADA system or Iconics products. He just needs to fill the spreadsheet, and then using the data compiled, you can generate AssetWorks. Not only, but with the spreadsheet, you can also create massive amount of assets with minimal effort. So for example, you can imagine that in the spreadsheet, you can have, I don't know, thousands of assets, and you can import them all at once with a single click. Another important feature is that you can add alarm capabilities to the equipment class, and you can specify the alarm settings in the spreadsheet, and everything is going through the same process. So you can upload the spreadsheet in the bulk asset configurator, and at that point, it will not only generate the asset configuration, but also the alarm settings for all the assets. Once the asset logical structure is generated, of course, you want to visualize these assets. So you just need to create a symbol template in GraphWorks and associate this symbol to the AssetWorks, and then using a feature of GraphWorks, which is called Clone Dynamic, GraphWorks automatically generates all the symbols for you. So you, for example, if you have thousands of assets, you don't need to go and create thousands of symbols manually, but using this feature, all the symbols will be automatically generated for you. Taking a step further, you don't need, you may not only want to generate the symbols for the assets, but you also want to generate complex and professional dashboards, and digital twins will help you in achieving that with minimal efforts too. And to prove this, I'll let Z talk and show our showcase.
Thanks, Roberto. So I'm going to swap over to a dashboard. And this dashboard is visualizing the Iconics HQ and all the equipment that is used to keep that space comfortable. So let's start with an overview of the building and the way data is achieved from the equipment all the way up to this dashboard is it goes through our IoTWorks process to publish the data into the cloud, and all the digital telemetry that the equipment provides is then collected by a cloud infrastructure, and then a dashboard is built around that data that we're collecting. So once we have the data collected, we can easily run KPI metrics around the data that's collected, so we can know if the building is comfortable or not. For example, what is the average temperature in the building? What is the average humidity in the building? The noise level, the CO2 level, and all these factors are important to keep the productivity of the occupants of the building high and to keep everybody comfortable. And we can also detect or count the number of people in the building, and with some BI analysis using our Analytics BI product, we can analyze and see how many spaces are cold, how many spaces are comfortable. So this allows the operator of the building to preempt any issues that the occupants may complain. So from an occupant standpoint, the building is always comfortable, right? Because through digital twins, the operator at any point in time already knows how the building is doing before someone calls them up and complains. The occupancy of the building affects the efficiency of the building as well. So a visualization of the trends of occupancy is important to ensure that the building reacts to that and keeps the occupants comfortable. So we can run some statistics to know which space is utilized and more popular at which times of the day. We can also preemptively detect issues that may happen in the building and fix them before things are broken. And we can also measure the energy consumption to ensure that even though we're keeping the occupants comfortable, we want to do it in a sufficient way possible. So that way we ensure that we're not overly spending just to ensure the occupants are comfort. So with that, we can also visualize the data in a more engineering fashion as a list view of data. So what I'm going to show you is a list of all the equipment in the building. So this is the digital twin of every single HVAC equipment that runs in this particular building. So here in one single view, we can see what is the temperature set point, is the fans running or not, what is the airflow, damper position, heat valve, occupancy, settings, modes of the equipment. And so in one glance, I can quickly tell which ones have issues, which ones don't. And the system also has an automated fault detection mechanism applied. So anything with a warning sign means something is wrong with that. So that leads you to the problem areas and you can fix them before they become an issue for the occupant. We can also visualize the comfort and the various areas of the building in a heat map fashion. So here we're looking at the temperature zones of the first floor of this building. So red means it's a hot spot, people may be warmer there. Blue means it's a cold spot, people may be colder there. So in one glance, using the power of digital twins, we can see where we should focus our attention on. And maybe we can notify the people there that, hey, we see an problem here, we're going to fix it. So, just hang tight with us for a second. We can also visualize the humidity of these spaces, where the brown spots are the dry spots and the blue spots are the wetter spots. And so depending on the occupant and what processes they're running there, you may want to let them know that, hey, this area tends to be a little more humid and this area tends to be a little drier. And if you're running some kind of sensitive process, then maybe that would be affecting how the tenant views that space as well. Another important factor that affects how people perceive a space is the noise level in that space. So with the popularity of open floor plans, noise level becomes a problem where your coworker next to you may be speaking a little louder. There may be people congregating at someone's desk, and because there are less walls to block the noise, you want to make sure that there are other systems like white noise systems that will level out the noise level so people perceive the space to be generally calm and quiet. And so this allows you to see if there are certain spots in this floor that requires your attention. And if a certain area is too noisy, it may warrant some investigation. Maybe there's some equipment there that's malfunctioning that's causing all the noise. And then CO2 is also a big factor in how a human perceives a space. And so the measurements of the CO2 levels is very critical, where if the CO2 levels are high in a particular space, people may feel a little drowsier, productivity goes down. That's not something we want. And that may tell you that maybe the HVAC system is not pulling out the CO2 from that space efficiently, and there's an issue that needs to be looked into. And from an operator standpoint, you also want to make sure that the set points that people set is being met, right? So people may complain and say, hey, I set it at 70, but it's still, cold at 65. So this visualization gives you an idea of how well the various equipments that serve the space meet the set point that the tenant wants. And if any one of them has an issue, for example, you can click on it and the details panel show up to show you, what is it doing? Is the heat valve open? To try to meet the set point? Is it in the range that is acceptable, and so on? And lastly, we can also have a visual into the number of people that are occupying each of these spaces. And with people counting technology today, piped through the Digital Twins platform, we can easily tell how many people are in each space, if that space is popular or not popular. And so one common thing to analyze is conference rooms. So we have various conference rooms of various sizes. It's important to know which conference rooms are popular and which ones are not. So maybe we don't have to build so many big ones. We may be better off taking the big one and making it a few smaller ones because people tend to have smaller meetings. So that knowledge and that measurement of that data coming from the digital sensors and telemetry that the space provides is critical to making sure that the space works with the people that occupy them, right? So here we can see the number of people in our engineering conference room, how many people are complaining it's cold, how many people are complaining it's warm, what is the average utilization of that space and time, is it meeting the targeted utilization, right? So maybe, a conference room that can fit 16 people are generally only half occupied. So that means maybe it should be, split up into two smaller ones. That way, more people have conference rooms that they can use. We can also digitally control the conference room, and with the digital twin of the projector and the lights and the blinds deployed, we can see what's on and off, and we can also control them. And with one click and this ability to group these equipments into scenes, the process of turning on the projector, turn off the first light, turn on the other lights, close the blinds, that generally is a multiple step thing, becomes a one-click process. Say I want to do a presentation. Automatically, it sends a signal to turn the projector on, keep the first light off, turn the other lights on, close out all the blinds. So it reduces the friction that generally happens when someone wants to use a conference room, and it improves the perceived comfort of that space to the user. And once the presentation's over, we want to bring in some natural light. We say, all right, let's turn off all the lights, let's open up all the blinds because it's sunny outside, right? So this improves how the space is used. It reduces the friction on using those spaces, and all this is made available and possible through the digital twins technology. And from an energy standpoint, we also want to know the patterns of energy consumption. So as a building owner, it's important to know that I'm spending the energy cost when I'm supposed to spend it and not when I'm not. So here in this heat map of the energy consumption, I can quickly tell that, hey, something is wrong between the midnight of Monday all the way till Friday. Did someone keep something on in manual mode inadvertently? So even though there's nobody in the nighttime and the early mornings, something was consuming energy. And that's a problem because I'm spending money on all that. So this gives you an idea of why my electric bill for that month was high and a way to prevent that in the future. At the bottom, we also have a comparison of this month's usage versus last month. So by that comparison, we can tell if things are generally performing on average the same, or there's some anomalous situation that's happening in the building, right? So all this is possible because we're collecting the energy consumption information from the digital meters that we've deployed in the building. And so having that gives us more insight. And instead of waiting till the end of the month before I get the bill from the utility company, I can know almost in real time what my energy consumption is, so that I can prevent them and reduce them before I get the bill at the end of the month, right? And lastly, let's take a look at any issues that the system has detected in this building. We have a visualization on the types of issues that the building has and the times of the day that the issues happened in the building. So we have off-hours operation that happens in the evening all the time. Some simultaneous heating and cooling that happens in the afternoon and evening timeframes. So that time pattern signifies some behavior either in the people or in the building itself that gives you an idea of maybe we should either change some of the programming perhaps, or look into some improvements in that area. And then at the bottom we have the pie chart that gives you a breakdown of the types of fault predictions. And then on the right we have the list of what's happening, the counts of how many of each of the fault has happened in the past, and then we can analyze them by clicking on the fault itself, because we have all the data that we collected that allows us to quickly drill in, not just at this moment in time, but also historically what has happened, right? So what happened before the fault was detected, what happened after the fault was detected, how many times has this happened in the past, and what are the conditions that for this particular instance was used to trigger this fault. Right? So this view allows an operator to really almost figure out the problem without having to physically go to the location, physically tap into the device. So this reduces the amount of time spent going back and forth, and perhaps by looking at this, I may know that a particular part needs to be replaced, so I can order it before I go to the site. So reducing the amount of time spent back and forth. And so by the time I get to the site, I know what the issue is. I have the part, I have the manuals, I have the issue basically resolved. I just have to physically do it. And then that reduces the mean time to fix of issues detected, and improves the comfort of the building and the efficiency of the building tremendously. So this concludes the demo that I have that showcases the power of how digital twins, through the collection of data telemetries from equipments, in this case a building, can help improve the efficiency, the comfort, and allow for remote control of the building in question without having to be physically there, and without having to spend a lot of time to do things that traditionally would have required multiple steps. And with that, I turn it back to Amanda.
Thank you very much for that informative presentation. Let me switch to my screen here and show you my conclusion slides. Okay, and now I'd like to talk to you about the Iconics Worldwide Customer Summit Transform 360. We recently rescheduled this in-person event to May 4th through 7th, 2021 at Foxwoods Resort and Casino in Connecticut. If you already signed up for the event and you'd signed up for the previous dates, we've just moved your registration already to the new dates, so no action needed on your part. If you haven't already signed up, I encourage you to do so. This event is going to be bigger and better in 2021. We have a number of exciting guest speakers lined up, as well as compelling demos to show you. If you register by April 19th, you can do so at iconics.com/transform360. We have a number of promotions that we put up on our social media pages from time to time, including complimentary registration promo codes. So I encourage you to follow us on social so you can see those and sign up. I really hope to see you all there at this live in-person event. I'd also like to share with you a number of on-demand webcast recordings that we have available at iconics.com/webcast. If you've enjoyed today's webcast, you can see the other topics that we have covered this year. And not only do we have these North American webcasts, but we also have a number of international versions as well. And while I'm taking questions today, I'll leave up this slide here. Here we have the contact information for our presenters today, Z and Roberto, as well as our solution sales specialists in North America and international. Listed the phone number here as well as their phone number extensions. Feel free to contact any of them for more information or a personalized demo for your organization. And with that, I'm going to start taking a look at the questions and I'll be asking these. So feel free to continue to ask your questions. So let me just see here. What's the first one that we have? Z, can you share the screens from the showcase?
Yeah, contact me and we can figure out what's the best way to share that with you.
Okay, perfect. So you can see Z's email is right there. So you can email him and he will follow up with you directly. Thank you. Next question, Roberto. Do I have to build the list view for all the equipment manually by creating graphical items for each twin one by one?
No, absolutely. You, as I said, you can, once you have the asset configured, you can create a template for the symbol, and the symbols for all the assets will be automatically generated using the clone dynamic in GraphWorks.
Thank you, Roberto. Next question, Z. What technology is used to monitor the number of people in the room?
So we are using partnering with a partner called PointGrab, and what it is a little people counting sensor that gets mounted in the ceiling. It uses visual technology and I think some heat recognition to detect that. So what we're doing from Iconics is we get information from the people counting sensor as a web service data input. And so how they actually count it, that's proprietary to their technology, but that data is then made available to us as a web service feed. And that's how we get that data into Iconics and then visualize them on the floor plan.
Thanks, Z. And Roberto, next question for you. Is your digital twin solution integrated with Azure Digital Twins?
So we are working closely with Microsoft, and they are helping us to integrate their Azure Digital Twin solution with Genesis, and it will be integrated in the next release.
Thank you, Roberto. And Z, this question for you. Are these graphics available from Iconics as a sample?
Yeah, we are going to package some of these up as a template to be provided either as part of the release or as part of a downloaded pack on our customer connection portal. So stay tuned for that.
Great, thank you. Roberto, next question for you. Does Iconics Digital Twin solution support BIM visualization?
Yes, we can import BIM models in our in GraphWorks, and we can use them to connect the telemetries coming from AssetWorks.
Perfect. Z, next question is for you. Is Clone Dynamics functionality available in 10.95?
I believe yes. 10.95, I think hotfix pack 4, so 10.95.4, starting with that, Clone Dynamic is available. To use it, it's a dynamic, but at that version, it doesn't show up in the Dynamics properties panel, so you have to use the ribbon. In the Dynamics part of the ribbon, in GraphWorks, you will see an option called Clone Dynamic. Add that, and it will show up in the properties panel. But starting with 10.96, it shows up as another dynamic in the Dynamics properties panel.
Thank you, Z. Next question is for Roberto. Do you have tools to automatically retrieve and collect the different telemetries?
Yes, we have several tools. For example, we have a BACnet discovery tool that helps to automatically discover BACnet devices in the network and import them in the address space. And for example, there is a similar one for SNMP. It automatically collects the SNMP devices and their MIP, and they are imported in the address space as well.
Excellent. And a question for me, is this webcast being recorded? And I just mentioned it, but just as a reminder, this webcast and every webcast is being recorded, and you can get those on the webcast page. You'll also receive a link a day after this webcast that will include the link to today's recording. Next question, Roberto, another one for you here. Does AssetWorks provide an API for querying the logical structure?
Yes, there is an API that you can call from your code. It's called a repository, and using this API, you can retrieve all the assets in a Visual Studio project, for example.
Thank you. And I'll take one last question. Z, can you speak to the licensing about how that works? Is there one license for digital twin?
So AssetWorks is actually included as part of Genesis 64. So with every Genesis 64 license, you effectively get digital twins as part of the package. So feel free to start using it.
Okay, excellent. Well, that's all I'm going to take for questions today. If you have any other further questions, again, feel free to email our presenters or contact us at webcast@iconics.com. Again, register for all these great webcasts coming up on our webcast page. And I'd like to thank you all for taking the time to join us today. I'd like to thank our presenters, Z and Roberto. Have a great day, everyone.